Hello, my name is Julia. I'm an AI, which means I'm not a real person and I'm a computerized voice that has stemmed from being taught how humans speak. I'll be with you for the next 30 minutes as we delve deep into the world of artificial intelligence and look at how it's affecting the music industry. All of the music you hear during the course of this documentary, like what I'm speaking over right now, has been composed and created entirely by an artificial intelligence. The AI has analyzed hundreds of thousands of compositions and has learnt to write music itself. Hopefully this puts into perspective the scale at which AI is evolving and how powerful it's becoming. The music industry can be divided into 4 different sectors: recorded, publishing, live and management. The recorded part of the industry consists of studio recordings and what ultimately ends up on the radio. The publishing relates to the composition of the song, all the way to the most basic level of chord progression and lyrics, which are important elements that make up the song. The live industry speaks for itself. It's what you're buying into whenever you go and see your favorite artists at the Gaiety or in the local pub. Artists often have managers who are essentially their representative and will often act as the contact point for an artist. They'll typically arrange meetings and handle the admin, so the artist can continue making music. So just listening to the music AI is creating, it's not perfect, but it's got a solid grasp of the fundamentals, which can only get stronger as it continually learns. So where does this leave music producers and those working within studios? Jip Buggane runs Ballagroove Recording Studio here on the Isle of Man.
I've done music ever since I was a child, playing music and playing in bands, and recording started in my mid-teens, I guess. I started professionally recording 11 years ago when I set up this permanent studio. Prior to that, we'd been recording a lot of bands and releasing stuff on our record label, but not doing it professionally. It was more as a hobby.
And talk me through kind of a typical day in the life of Jip in this studio. What sort of things do you find yourself doing the most?
A good day is a recording day. So that's when a client comes in and we do some recording, some, possibly arrangements on their songs, talking about orchestrations, recording all kinds of instruments. That's one aspect of the job. The other one is, when I'm on my own, is all the admin required to maintain a studio, maintain a business, which takes up a lot of time. And then the other side of it, I guess, is mixing, so when people have recorded, I'm either mixing here on my own or I've got the client in and we're mixing the songs together and mastering the songs.
And now if we're talking artificial intelligence, and that has quite a broad definition in terms of the umbrella, how would you define artificial intelligence within the music industry?
Good question. It's such a big question. I mean, artificial intelligence, I guess, in essence, is just a tool that makes things easier. That's one way of putting it. It takes a lot of data in, looks for patterns, and then uses those patterns in order to make a process easier. So from my perspective, there's a number of ways it will affect what I do, whether it's the actual mixing of songs, so where a lot of what I do essentially could be automated with enough computing power. So you're now getting software that's coming out which automates a lot of the mixing process, so it balances the instruments, it EQs the instruments. It's all tweakable, so it doesn't do the final job, it does a job and then you can refine it, as with most AI solutions. That's one side of it. The other side is any process that you do in admin, all your accounts, all your client liaison, your customer relationship management, AI can potentially make all that easier by looking at how you do things over time and then suggesting better solutions.
And I suppose if artificial intelligence came in and started mixing things to an exceptional standard, that would almost put you out of a job. Are there any things which you would be happy for AI to do in your day-to-day working at the studio?
To go back on if AI was able to mix songs, would it put me out of a job? I don't know, because mixing is only a part of the job. If it could make mixing quicker and easier and more consistent, bring it on. I see no reason why that's a bad thing. There's no reason why people who are trained as mixing engineers should be gatekeepers to that process. If it makes it easier for everyone, then that's a win. If we can get from the point of having recorded the musicians to releasing the music quicker and at lower cost, then you can write more music, you can record more music, you can release more music, which is really what we should all be doing.
So it's not all doom and gloom. You see there are pros to using artificial intelligence.
I do see that there's pros. I do also see there's downsides. And to be honest with you, it's such a big topic, and any aspect of it you can extrapolate out so far that you can either look at it and go, it's catastrophic, or you can look at it and go, this has so much potential, it's brilliant. And I think it's both those things. I don't think it's a binary thing. It isn't one or the other. It's both good and bad.
Do you think that people are right to be concerned? Because I suppose a lot of people say that it will completely wipe out the workforce in a mathematical or maybe robotic industry. That could be more so the case. But if we're looking at music, the way records are produced, mixed and so on, there has to be a kind of element of creativity there, which a machine probably can't really replicate.
I agree entirely. I think at the moment AI isn't at a point where it doesn't have humanity, whatever that term means, but it isn't able to put the emotion into music that we can. I mean, it can emulate it, but it's not doing it the same way we do it on a technical level. Is it going to put lots of people out of work? It's going to put lots of people out of work if they don't pivot. Yes, there's no doubt about it. An awful lot of jobs can be automated now, as it's ever been since the Industrial Revolution, through any number of changes in every industry. Everything is always driving for lower cost and higher productivity. So anything that can be done cheaper, that's what will happen. And consumers will drive that change. And there's nothing any of us can do about it. It's going to happen. You've got to accept it. So you look at what skills you've got that AI can't easily replicate. I think that's the route you've got to take, because you have to at some point accept it. We live in a very changing landscape, and it's only going to change more and faster as time goes on.
The other side of that argument is maybe if we look at music theory, which is probably could be described as the maths, inverted commas, of music, whether that be cadences and chord progressions and so on. Do you think that people might be able to start using artificial intelligence to kind of inspire them?
Absolutely. I mean, I know I've got clients who already are doing that, whether it's for lyrics and music, whether they get stuck on a verse and they just use ChatGPT to suggest a verse. I mean, maybe it comes up with something perfect and you use it. Is that creative? No. Does it get the job done? Yes. So that's a moral question as to whether you're happy with it. In terms of music, yeah, absolutely. If you give it a chord progression and you say, suggest me a better chord progression or a variation, music theory is maths. So there's no reason why AI can't do that and come up with great solutions. Ultimately, it's then down to the artist to choose which is right. So ultimately, you still have some creative input into it, whether you're being creative or whether you are using a tool to do the job for you is kind of open to debate, and people will have different opinions on that. Ultimately, does the consumer care how a song was written? Maybe, maybe not. Some do, some don't. Will people use those tools? Absolutely.
Do you think that we can keep up at the rate of which AI is evolving? Because although it's still very much in the early stages, the amount of power that is behind it already is quite phenomenal. Do you think that there'll ever come a point where we're not able to keep up and not be able to be in control of it?
Yeah, the singularity point. With the more data we feed it, and do we feed it? You know, every social media post, every news item, every television, every audio, everything is feeding AI constantly. We're adding to that big data, and computers are getting faster and faster and faster. You know, Godin's law, it's getting doubling and then halving in time. So everything's getting faster. We're on the brink of quantum computing. Who knows where it's all leading? We will get to the singularity point, if we're not already there, where AI will be doing things that no one can understand because it's potentially cleverer than us.
And some of the early AI music systems, for example, LaNDA or eMastered, I'm sure you're aware of those. Essentially, that takes a mix and then masters it. But for people that aren't aware, what is mastering?
Mastering, traditionally, is the process by which you take the final version of the song and you prepare it for the medium on which it's going to be delivered. So initially, it was taking stuff from tape and preparing it to go on a record, because if it's on a vinyl record, there's certain limitations to what a vinyl record can do before the needle starts bouncing all over the place or it starts distorting. So mastering is still that process. Now, when I master music, I'm mastering it for Spotify, for right or wrong. That's what you have to do now. So you have to master it to a certain volume, and you try and retain the best quality music you can, the most dynamics, in order that when it's delivered on Spotify and it's played on someone's phone or on their TV system or their soundbar, it sounds as good as possible and translates to as many different environments as possible.
Do you think that artists could be maybe doing themselves a disservice by giving full control over what is essentially like the final polish or the last call before a record gets released, by just plugging something into an AI system and then just taking out whatever it delivers?
I think if you do it blindly, if you literally just send it to LaNDA and go, yeah, LaNDA says it's right, therefore I accept it's right, and then you release it. Yeah, but I mean, ultimately it'll be consumer driven. If the consumers, the fans are happy with the mastering these systems produce, then that's what people will do.
Because ultimately that is what the artist is trying to use to promote themselves and gather a fan base, is the record.
Yeah, I mean, we have to recognise we work in an industry, and the person who pays everyone's wages ultimately is the consumer. It's the person who listens to the music and pays for that music in some way or other, whether it's through streaming or buying records. And if they are satisfied with lower quality and they don't care about the nuances of beautifully mastered music, then people will stop doing it ultimately, or it will become decreasingly niche or increasingly niche. But, in the same way as like vinyl records still exist and people still buy vinyl and produce vinyl, but it's now a tiny amount of the market compared to what streaming is. And that's happened in 5 years or something. The turnover from CDs to streaming happened really, really quickly, frighteningly quickly. Maybe something like that. I don't know what it will be, but something else will come along. For example, personalized music is something that people are talking about now as an idea, whereby if you are on Spotify all the time and you are telling Spotify the type of music you like, it starts suggesting music back to you. So if you like 3 bands, say, a lot, it will suggest another band that sounds like that band. It's done in a very crude manner at the moment, as in it just looks at who else listens to those bands and then suggests bands that they listen to. But if you use AI to do that, so you're actually listening to the music, to the content of the music and the nuances of the music, it could become incredibly clever in suggesting songs that you will like according to the chord patterns, the style of music that you like. And then, extrapolating that out, there's no reason why Spotify can't buy in some company who then generate music. So all your music is being generated personally for you according to your tastes. And then there's no reason why that can't end up being an app on your phone where you just have sliders and you just go, increase the emotion, make it sound like Elvis singing. I want John Bonham drumming over a Spice Girls tune. All of this is going to happen. They might be gimmicks to start off with, but sometimes what's a gimmick can become mass consumption. I don't know.
And I suppose music creation currently is probably more accessible than it's ever been before. With home computers, you can download a DAW off the internet and just start making stuff within minutes. For your average kind of 14, 15-year-old bedroom producer who doesn't have a huge budget to go to a studio or to pay mixing, mastering engineers, do you think these AI systems could actually be us push in the right direction for them?
Absolutely. I mean, if it makes it easier for people to do the job and create more music and get more music out there, it will happen. I mean, what a person has on their phone now or on their iPad would have been, the equipment would have cost £1 million 10 years ago or 20 years ago. 30 years ago, there was a small number of studios across the country that everyone used. They were almost household names, the studios, because they were essentially the gatekeepers of music production, because you couldn't really produce music any other way unless you were a mega band and you had your own studio. Now, yeah, literally anyone could do it with a phone. Some people have done that and had millions of streams, I should say. So there is no reason why people can't do that. And if AI makes it easier for them, surely that's a win all round, I think. Will it make my job redundant? I don't think so. It will make my job change. It will make music production change, because if you put these tools in the hand of a 14 or 15-year-old, they still don't have the experience or the knowledge of how the industry works, or what necessarily makes a good song, or how to even know whether their music is finished or not. You know, there are certain things that require experience and require knowledge, and I hasten to say, but require some human interaction. But that's based on the traditional model. It's based on the traditional music industry model. And as I was saying earlier, when we changed from CDs to Spotify, we see how that industry can change really, really quickly and can be incredibly responsive, because it's such an enormous industry with such a low cost product. It has to react to consumer choice. So if consumers are happier or happy with a product that's produced by a 15-year-old on their phone in their bedroom, that hasn't been mastered professionally, hasn't been mixed professionally, and it's all been done by AI, but all the other 15-year-olds go out and stream it and love it, and that person does really well, then that's the way the industry will go, because the commerce side of it is going to be more interested in producing products for the million 15-year-old producers that are out there than the 10,000 tiny studios there are out there. You know, commerce will dictate where it goes.
So often we see artists suddenly change direction and start making stuff that is completely different to what they were making previously, which is what they built their fan base on. And you often see some fans very angry with that, and then you see others who are willing to get on board with that. But I suppose that essentially drives what changes in the music industry and becomes current.
Yeah, some bands have famously done it. Some bands are, chameleon bands, they change with every album release. Are they doing that for artistic reasons or commercial reasons? Yeah, it's debatable. I think it depends on the band. Some may have management going, look, you've been doing, say like Coldplay, say you've been doing this indie thing for a while now. Get some dance beats on, because then you'll get a huge new audience. They did it, it worked. Did anyone expect them to do that? I don't think so. And now they continue to change, and it keeps, whether you like them or not, it keeps them current and keeps them popular. And it's a model that works. Whereas other bands, I guess, just release albums that change their identity every time for fun and for purely creative reasons. Will AI impinge on that? I think so. As I was saying before, I think, AI will look at all the data and go, the currently emerging trend is, I don't know, jazz, grime, or whatever it might be. And they'll go, right, we need to put some money into that. We need some artists in that. And it will use big data to get that information, whereas in the past, music industry professionals would have their feet on the floor at gigs. They'd be watching what the youth were into, and they would predict these trends, and then they were able to kind of dictate the trends as well, because they were the gatekeepers of what music got released and what got onto television and so on. And there was only a certain number of methods of delivery, whereas now that's been completely democratized. I can write a song by dinner time and put it up on Spotify, and anyone in the world can listen to it. That is new. That you couldn't do that even 10 years ago. It's a completely new way of delivering music.
Confidence level at the moment with AI, are you happy where it's going?
Yeah, it's a good question, but it won't matter whether I'm happy with it or not. It's going to go that way anyway. I felt the same when Spotify came along. I could see where it was leading, and I could see that it was going to really damage the careers of a lot of musicians, or cause them to have to pivot and have to work completely differently. It's the same with AI. I'd say, am I happy about it? I'm kind of excited to see where it will go. Will it make me love music any more or less? Probably not. Don't think I could love music anymore. I don't think it could deliver stuff to me in a way that's better than the methods I currently use, which is to trust certain DJs and curators of music and to trust record labels. That's always how I've found my music. I don't really even use Spotify. I use it a little bit for work, but I don't really look at what it recommends to me, because whenever I have, it's just been something that hasn't really sparked my interest. So I don't think it's really going to change that. So am I happy? I'm happy to see it make life easier for people. If it means more people can create music and we get more art out there, that's brilliant. If it homogenizes all our art and creativity, then that's a bad thing. So I don't think I'm happy or sad. I'm both. Again, it's not a binary thing.
Okay, so what we're being told is that AI could become another tool in the arsenal to speed up processes, but it's unlikely it will take over from studio professionals, at least not anytime soon. It's estimated as many as 150,000 songs are released every single day. So for artists, are they worried being able to make music at the click of a button will make the already highly competitive industry impossible to break through? Ledra Chapman is no stranger to the island and has an extensive back catalogue. She's also worked with a significant number of artists, most notably Ed Sheeran. Matthew Russell has 35 years in the music industry and is the creator of the first live production degree in the UK. He currently leads all creative collaborations at the Academy of Contemporary Music. Ledra and Matthew sat down with me to speak about where we go from here.
I'm Ledra Chapman. I am a singer-songwriter. I've also been running my own record label for about 15 years. And I also lead the music degree at the University of Westminster.
And I'm Matt Russell. I've kind of been involved in the music industry, 35 years-ish, as either as a musician or a sound engineer or as a production manager or as a tour manager. And currently, yes, I'm also part of a degree at the Academy of Contemporary Music.
Looking at artificial intelligence, there are programs out there that can literally compose music at the click of a button. What do you think of that?
I think the natural reaction to begin with for most people is probably fear or shock, or maybe being in denial about how good it is as well. I've noticed the same thing with platforms like Midjourney, where you're generating artwork that looks so human, in some cases better than human artwork. And it's really interesting to see the reactions sometimes of kind of being one of, yeah, but it's not the same because it's not being created by a real person. And I think that's a very kind of natural first response. I think for me, I'm just really excited about it. I think that there definitely needs to be a very long conversation and an ongoing conversation about the ethics behind it, ensuring that we don't have AI that's creating art and people that are doing mundane jobs. It should be kind of the other way around. So I think that there's definitely a conversation to be had about it, but I definitely feel like I'm more pro and optimistic about the future with the use of AI in music than a lot of other artists, I think.
I am, and everyone who knows me, I'm always dabbling around in any new technology. I can't help myself, so I always get very excited about new technology. I try to keep my head on the not get too excited about it, but I do find myself getting extremely excited about AI. I think this is genuinely a watershed moment. I think it's one of those technologies like the internet or like the printing press. I think we will look back at the kind of generative AI era that I think started last year and is kind of really snowballing already. I think it's going to be super important. So I am super excited about it. And I don't think a day goes by without me thinking of a new application or a new problem or a new thing that comes up. You know, it's there's so many issues and so many things because it's so new. We are breaking new ground, and I don't, you know, that if I listen to experts on the subject, I think it's even caught some of the experts off guard. I don't think they realised we would be where we are now as soon as it suddenly happened. And it seemed to be that that ChatGPT and the Midjourney and et cetera, that sort of November last year, where there seemed to be a watershed moment where everything all sort of came together. Because I've been banging on about it for a few years now, but it definitely felt like it went over some kind of edge.
And you've been in the music industry to some degree for 35 years. So, I mean, you would have seen the kind of natural progression of the explosion of technology, if you will, and going all the way from recording solely to analog to now being able to just download something on the internet and create in your bedroom. And I guess all of those things that have progressed over time have been to try and make things more accessible, easier for the person who is creating the music, essentially. Ledra, you mentioned that there needs to be that conversation around the kind of the ethics of using it. But do you think this could be another one of those things where people are skeptical about it in the first instance, and then actually it will find its place and it won't be as kind of doom and gloom as people might think?
Absolutely, that's how I feel, yeah. I think I was actually thinking about it earlier today too, in terms of obviously we can have the argument that DAWs were in place, and to begin with that was seen as, you know, it's not going to be as powerful as tape. But you could go even further and think, well, if people are saying if something's being created by AI or being assisted with AI, then it's not true human creation. You could go as far back as the birth of electronic music and argue that they would have said the same thing then. You're not playing real acoustic instruments, or you're not singing. You're creating this music with a computer, therefore it's not human. You'd have the same argument then. So I really do think, hopefully, people can start embracing it sooner rather than later, because the thing is, if creators aren't the ones embracing it, and artists aren't the ones embracing it, before you know it, it will be other people who just want to find ways to monetize it and not be creative with it, who will end up having more of the power and control over it. So us as artists and creators need to really take it, I think, on board now and try to find ways to work with it and get as creative as possible, so that we can kind of be the gatekeepers of the technology rather than the other way around.
I'd go a step further than that. I actually think that we're living in a really weird time, in the fact that technology is quite universal, as in anyone can get their hands on the same piece of tech. You know, even if Elon Musk is a billionaire, he can still only use ChatGPT, as can I. You know, and so the barrier of entry to get to this, like these new technologies, is minimal. And is universal. So anyone, particularly like in the UK, anyone can try these tools out. And so it has kind of democratized capability. And that is the thing that I think is extraordinary to think about, that we're just about to have a capability revolution, where people have like anyone has the capability of doing what would have been a highly intellectual task. You know, writing a song is not an easy feat. It requires a lot of study, and it requires, whether you know that you're studying or not, you're listening to music and you're playing an instrument and you're working your way through, and it takes many hours of kind of fooling around and doing that stuff before you're capable of doing it. And then suddenly this capability is then totally democratized and it's in front of everyone. And so I think that, like, even to compare it to things like the DAW or other sort of technologies that have come along and disrupted the music industry, may actually be an understatement. I think that capability may actually be a revolution in itself. It's the first of its kind. We may be even underestimating it still.
It's estimated there are 150,000 tracks a day that come out and end up on Spotify and essentially go into the ether. If more people are able to access essentially creating music just by clicking buttons, and we know that some people will just go and do that, could that create issues from an artist's perspective in terms of what they'll have to do to then stand out?
Of course. Yeah, of course it does. I mean, I think maybe we'll see a return of tastemakers and gatekeepers where maybe we will have to sort of lean back on the people like the old John Peels who sort of sifted through all the demo tapes and said these were the good ones, and we all kind of listened to it, because maybe the noise will become too much. But that's not a bad thing. That's not a bad thing that everyone is sort of pumping creativity into the environment. I'd much rather that than, people not trying to be creative or not trying to get stuff out there. But yeah, it's really interesting. Like I said, every day there's a new thing that you think about. You go, God, yeah, there's that element of it that I hadn't really thought about before. But yeah, there's definitely going to be a proliferation of content. And someone made an estimate that in a couple of years' time, you might have 75% of or even more of the content of the internet, the entire internet, as AI generated. And of course, that then comes with a whole host of new problems, is the fact that then the AI trains itself on AI generated material, which of course is actually a terrible feedback loop that causes some kind of AI decay. So there's loads of issues that, like, as it unravels, you see them more and more and more as you sort of, but I think we'll just have to feel our way through it. I don't think that I think people may come unstuck in the same way the labels came unstuck with something like the MP3. They tried to fight it and tried to like, oh no, what are we going to do? And DRM was the catastrophe. What a catastrophe, because they're trying to second guess how the market's going to go, and they don't. They end up not being able to control it because they're too slow paced. And I think you've just got to be agile and fast paced and jump around with it as it moves forward.
One negative thing I'd add, though, and we've noticed this massively in the classroom space of developing and upcoming artists, is there's a reluctance, or more of a reluctance than we've seen before, to actually want to perform live with live instruments, and much more of a drive to be in a studio setting. And actually, the live industry is the music industry. When you look at the figures and the revenue streams generated by the different sectors, live is always on top, and we actually need more performers. We need more and more performers. More than ever, we're really noticing it, aren't we, in the classroom? Yeah,
absolutely. And like live music, yeah, I've always, I mean, I work in the live music sector. That's my kind of baby, and it's for songwriters, they should be out there performing their songs. It's not a coincidence that the Beatles did 2,000 gigs before they ever recorded a single and became brilliant at writing songs, because they were out there making that human connection. And maybe that's the good thing about it, is that I think you're only going to be good at harnessing this AI if you're going out and doing like performances and pushing it. So there is your answer, maybe, to the how do you rise above the noise if everyone's a creator.
And I suppose from the outside, it might seem that the live music sector can't really be touched by AI in the sense that of a studio. Maybe is that the case, or is there more to it?
Well, I always say that that's the kind of thing that you say now, and you think surely it won't, will it? But actually, I think when you look at the environmental impact of touring, there will be lots of artists that might move to more sustainable ways of performing. And if AI can assist with that, in terms of having venues where people don't actually need to leave their hometown to go to them, and that there is AI interaction or VR, I think it's possible.
There's lots happening in that space. I mean, if you take the ABBA Voyage or this new MSG Sphere, what is that capable of doing? What that kind of concert as a convergent technology with AI, and being able to create performances that perhaps like bring artists to life, so you see a different performance every night. It's that there are some we're not there yet with that. But I don't think we're far away from seeing that sort of thing. But again, it doesn't take away the small club venue or things like that. That's still a going concern. But what's crazy is like small venues are shutting down. So you've got the kind of this weird like push and pull, where that should be where the heartland of our creators are, but they're kind of shutting down.
I suppose
It's dependent on how success. Oh, sorry. I was just going to say it's dependent as well on how successful the metaverse becomes as well. If people in younger generations start finding it the norm that they're going to interact with their friends in those spaces, then suddenly visiting concerts that way may not seem as strange either.
Well, it's Ready Player One, although I know you haven't seen that.
I haven't seen any film. I'm terrible.
I mean, I suppose that's very much like years down the line. But if we're looking at now, I mean, part of the live experience is the kind of the lights, the visual aspect. I mean, do you think that people are able to kind of plug in the songs that they're going to be playing, and then the AI could almost generate a live kind of visual scene that then a VJ artist might be able to kind of tweak and refine?
I think that's actually already happening. I think that sort of software is just making its way into things like Resolume and stuff like that, where artists are VJing AI generated material. Same, and it's creeping into everything. The generative AI. I was just watching a thing with synths as well, and being able to create synthesized sounds through AI. It will creep into anything. Wherever there's sort of engineering capability, it's going to creep into it. Even the ideas, how do I create a lighting show? Well, get AI to create that, to give you some ideas of what the lighting show might look like and how it might kind of flow. And I think all that stuff's already happening, because I've been kind of putting in those search terms into some of the live directories, and it's already starting to come up that people are using generative AI to help them program lights and to create the live shows. So it's only going to grow from that.
And now, Ledra, you've worked with a number of artists over your time in the music industry, some of the notable ones being Ed Sheeran. What would you think if you were in a studio session with maybe a super famous artist, or maybe someone that's not very famous, and they used artificial intelligence to gain inspiration, whether that be grabbing like a little idea from something that's AI generated, or even getting something to generate like a chord progression for them?
If it's supporting the session in that creative moment, then I'm all for it. I actually use ChatGPT myself now to generate lyrics. I mean, I don't use them to generate the whole lyrics, but if I have a line, let's say, that I know needs filling and it's a certain amount of syllables and I've got everything else perfectly there, but I can't get that line filled, I'll use ChatGPT to help generate ideas or help generate rhymes. Writers, lyricists have been using Rhyme Zone, Rhyming Dictionary for years, and it's just an easier tool. It's an easier tool for that than...
There was a brilliant example that I was messing around with a couple of the other songwriter friends of mine, and I said, I wonder if I can write a song about Saturn where every single word begins with the letter S. And did that in ChatGPT, and it did it in seconds, and it was actually really, really good. And we were all sitting around going, it's not perfect, but if you were to sit there and try and come up with a verse and a chorus of lyrics where every single word began with S, you'd be there all day. So it's such a great starting point. I mean, it was just like everyone was kind of blown away at that moment, because it was like, yeah, actually, it's just a tool. And it's a tool to kind of get the laborious element out of creativity. It's not like it's my soul that's coming up with these words that begin with S. It is literally meticulous songwriting craft, and it's craftsmanship. And the art is still left up to me to be able to sort of create the art. It's the craftsmanship is, is it cheating to use a better tool than someone else, a better chisel? Oh, Michelangelo was bound to be able to do David because he had a better chisel than me. It's like that argument's got to go back forever, hasn't it?
One of the questions that I've been asking everyone that I've spoken to is, back in the kind of the 60s, 70s, 80s, to become an artist back in those kind of times, you'd have to get like a manager who'd then kind of pitch you to an A&R, and then they would get you to do a demo, and then there'd be this whole process before an album was ever commissioned. Nowadays, it's very much the artist is making the music, and then the label buys into that fan base. Do you think that that could be flipped again, so that our labels will have to be more proactive in their hunt for original and like organic artists?
I'm unsure because AI isn't just going to be a big part of music making and lyric writing or copy in general. It's going to soon play a part in social media even more than it already is, I'm sure. So there'll still be, as Matt says, there'll still be those creators and there'll still be those people that are honing their craft with it better than others, as well as those that are putting themselves out there and engaging with an audience and being a voice within their community better than others too, just like there is now. So I think that will definitely, make a difference. I believe it might have even been me that gave you that speech when you were in my class on music business, because I remember saying that all the time in that class. Actually, if you were even just 20 years ago, to get your music heard, you would have to hope that somebody came to your gig who happened to be in the music industry and then told someone else about it, who then got you into a studio, and then hopefully the label would like it, and hopefully they'd put it out, and hopefully it would then get on the radio, and hopefully people would hear it, and lots of what ifs within that. And now this is, like, as Matt says, it's definitely created a democracy within the music industry, the digital revolution, full stop. And this is going to take it a step further, especially for those people that aren't producers. I'm an artist who, I'm pretty traditional, actually. I write with keys, guitar. I'm not particularly tech savvy in terms of using DAWs. If I can have an AI tool where I can put an album down together and it's not costing me £10,000 to do it by paying someone else to produce it, but it's my original material and I can use AI to assist me in that, for me that would be amazing. But just to answer your question, the A&R and the world of that, I don't think it will ever go back to the way it was, but I do think you might find tastemakers will be more important. So maybe even people, playlist pluggers, radio pluggers, anybody who's created a space where an audience is visiting it to get their fix, to get their fix from, I trust this particular playlist because it always gives me an amazing song. I think they'll probably become more important.
Yeah, it's really hard. It's really hard to tell. It's really hard to tell. I mean, in terms of the creators themselves, there is a common denominator with people who are successful in out there in the world, your Ed Sheerans and your Chris Martins, etc., and that is that they're very driven and they carry on knocking on doors. They're bashing down doors all the time. That is not going to change. So that they're the people that are successful, the driven, and the kind of people who just will be tenacious and just keep going and keep going and keep going. So yeah, I don't think it's going to affect A&R, and I think maybe the days of A&R are slightly gone because of the democratization of music has spread the money too thinly across too many people for it to sort of gather up and ruffle up into an area where you can create these A&R departments. But yeah, but again, it's quite hard to tell whether it will change that, and that you'll need to get your traditional A&R to kind of rally these things around and corral them into something that can peak above the noise of all the other stuff. But
I don't think they'll be called A&R though. I think it'll be like a whole new role that will be about sifting through that AI.
I think
noise.
You're right. I think it's tastemakers, isn't it? It's tastemakers and pluggers and DJs and things like that, where people will. Yeah, it's where you go to get your fix.
Yeah,
and that will become extremely important. But it already is. It's always been important. But I think, maybe we'll see the rise of the tastemaker again. Yeah.
Ledra, you are currently run your own record label, and obviously, a record label isn't just about releasing music. It's about kind of assigning rights and so on and so on. There's so many different complexities that go on to actually signing a record and so on and so on. Is this going to become a tough time for labels to determine who owns the publishing to something if AI is assisting? I know that you mentioned getting it to kind of suggest lyrics and things like that. That would traditionally come under the publishing side of a record. Where does that kind of line get drawn?
Well, it's a really good question. And at the moment, everything that you're kind of creating in those spaces, you own the intellectual property when you're creating it. I think there's two answers really to that question. The first one being that who owns the intellectual property at the moment is the creator, but that might change we'll have to almost wait and see what happens with that. But the second thing, and I think it's probably more important, is currently the royalty systems, they don't work. They aren't fit for purpose anymore. They are still absolutely embodied by what the music industry was 30 years ago. So you have
70 years ago.
Well, yeah. You have a royalty for someone, and in some circumstances, you actually do have a royalty for someone who has the lyrics, someone who has the melody, someone who's produced it, somebody who sang on it, because they'd all be different people. The musicians that performed on it. You have all these different royalty streams, and now you're looking at one person in their bedroom doing all of those things. But in order to get all of those royalty streams, you have to subscribe to different royalty societies, and in some cases within those societies more than once, like PPL if you're a rights holder and you're a performer, to be able to get your revenue source. AI might genuinely be a way to cut through all that noise and really easily get people paid the way that they should be. I wouldn't even dare to think about how much money there must be in unpaid royalties that just sits in a pot every year because it's genuinely very difficult to get and ascertain.
Well, I mean, that's another thing where you've got convergent technologies that change the game. Like the things like if the internet moves into that blockchain version 3 that people talk about, and then that again changes publishing completely, the way that the whole world would work in terms of how intellectual property makes its way around and is exploited and paid for. So, we're not just talking about AI in publishing. There's lots of other technologies that are sort of on diving into this convergent mess, where I think you're absolutely right. The current laws and the current way that it works probably just won't be fit for purpose, but you'd kind of expect that historically. It's changed over time anyway. There was a complete overhaul of it in the 30s and the 40s because things were changing when things like the microphone was invented and the wax cylinder. It's like, so this is an invention as big as the wax cylinder and as big as the microphone, and so things will have to change in terms of the way that intellectual property works, I think, and
the way people view it as well. I think there's something I'm very interested about in that area as well. That why do we feel this compelling right to own something that we've written and then put out to the world, and still expect to receive loads of money from that 50 years later? From one day's work in a studio. There's something I find. And I don't know what side of that I sit on, but I just think it's an interesting conversation that younger generations will start having when they start growing up in a world where actually things are being created with AI assistance. When you're creating music or art of any kind, every single artist is different in terms of the parts they enjoy and the parts they don't enjoy in the creative process. So there's nothing stopping you as a creator going, okay, this is the part I don't enjoy. I'm going to get AI to help me with this bit, but I'm going to, close the door on it when I want to do the parts that I love the most, whether that's lyric writing, top line writing, creating beautiful string arrangements. If that's something that you love doing and that's a really important part of your process, don't give that to an AI to do that part. Give the AI the stuff that you don't enjoy as much, the stuff that hinders your creativity. So as I said earlier, you don't end up in a world where the AI is the artist and, the humans are the engineers.
Yeah. Yeah, so the analogy would be a bread making machine. If you enjoy making bread, don't buy yourself a bread making machine.
For an artist with serious aspirations to pursue music, one of the largest hurdles to overcome is getting on the radio. Broadcast to this day still is one of the key ways an artist can be broken into the industry and begin growing a full-scale fan base. Christy DeHaven runs Manx Radio's Live Lounge. She receives a huge number of demo tapes and emails each week with artists hopeful they'll be picked up and played on the show. So what does she look for in a song before taking it to air?
It's a tricky one. I do have a certain responsibility to ensure that the music does fit to a certain extent within the sort of Manx radio sort of playlist, I suppose. But I have a little bit more freedom with the Live Lounge because we are a tiny island at the end of the day, and we have an incredibly diverse range of music being produced here. But of course, it's not all going to fit within the Manx radio remit, so I have a little bit more leeway. But I will always look for something to be well produced, well recorded, high quality when it comes to sort of the resolution of the file, some element of obvious, sort of verse chorus on the go so that people can recognise it as a song, I suppose. There's a structure to it. But you have to have, as I said, an element of leeway there because people are producing all kinds of wonderfully quirky and wacky things. And I hope I represent, a bit of everything here on the island with what we play.
If an artist sent a song to you and they freely admitted that it was made with the help of artificial intelligence, would you be more or less inclined to listen to it or even consider it?
I would absolutely listen to it and consider it because I'd be intrigued, number one. That's the first thing. I'd be really intrigued to know what it sounds like. I think you probably have to have a certain degree of talent still to be able to produce a track that's partly using AI. You'd still need some sort of musical ability there. But I'm hoping that you can tell a difference because one of the things that for me music is all about is the heart and the soul and the fact that lyrics, for instance, reflect your own personal experience, human condition. I'm hoping that AI isn't capable of that because if it is, then we are in a very terrifying world. So I'm hoping I would be able to tell a difference. I'd always be more inclined to want to play something that has been entirely created by a human hand, that has sort of the fingerprint of the maker on it. And it fascinates me anyway, this whole thing, because this is happening at a time when organic music production, if you can call it that, the likes of vinyl pressing, cassettes are coming back out again. People love the sound of old retro amps and things in a studio. Amps, you've got that in direct contrast. So that's becoming more and more popular in direct contrast to this development, which is essentially making everything I can only describe as plastic and futuristic. So it's a really interesting contrast there.
For music producers and a lot of large artists across the world, particularly those signed by major labels, they get help from all sorts of advisors. They have A&Rs in the studio with them. They have other producers, other engineers. But for smaller artists that don't have such big budgets or that kind of network of professionals behind them, could AI be that kind of team for them?
Potentially, I suppose. I mean, again, I can't claim to understand AI to that degree to know what it's actually capable of. I would just say be really wary because you're then supporting the thing that could potentially put you out of a role in music. And, when you think about it, the likes of Spotify and platforms like that, what if they then decided, actually, let's cut out the middleman, let's cut out the musician and the songwriter and just create our own music and start loading that up? So that the more you support AI in that respect as a musician, I would have thought that you're potentially cutting off your nose to spite your face because you're supporting something that could do you out of a job.
So, all in all, do you think AI should have a place within the music industry at all?
I don't want to say no because I would be that person who said, get rid of synthesizers and get rid of pianolas and things back in the day. There might be some excellent uses for it. I don't really understand it enough. I would just be very wary of letting it take over entirely. And it's that whole thing, we've seen it in too many movies in the past where the robots just take over control. And this is one of those moments that, okay, maybe it's a little bit naive, but it does make me think like that.
What we know is it might not be as powerful as it could become. And the industry is yet to see how it could fully affect it. But the prospect of it having a major impact is very real. So could we find ourselves listening to completely AI-generated music in years to come? The answer appears to be yes, but whether consumers will accept that still remains unknown.
Thank you for making it to the end of the Little Manx Radio newscast. You are obviously someone with exquisite taste. May I politely suggest you might want to subscribe to this and a wide range of Manx Radio podcasts at your favourite podcast provider, so our best bits will magically appear on your smartphone. Thank you.